Thank you for joining me in hearing a presentation about how students and teaching staff in the UK HE sector are using technology. So why is this topic important? Well, in the UK, the Office of Students predicted that over 1 million digitally skilled people will be needed by 2020. So we knew that this was a really important topic for all students in the UK. In addition to this, universities and colleges have been investing an awful lot of money into the digital infrastructure. So about 4 years ago, a membership group for the heads of IT in universities and colleges came to us and asked if we could help them develop some sort of mechanism where they could collect evidence of students and teaching staff's experience of the digital infrastructure. Firstly, in order to identify where there were digital skills gaps, but also to ensure that all students and staff were really benefiting from the investment that was being made into the digital infrastructure. And this was so institutions could get a baseline measure on where they were at when they were implementing their digital strategies. So we've been working with over 150 institutions over the last 4 years to develop a set of surveys which would gather this data. In addition to the surveys, we've also been developing lots of resources around them. These are freely available on our website. So at the moment, we have 4 surveys, one for students, one for teaching staff, one for professional service staff, and a new one this year for researchers. Each of these 4 surveys have 4 themes that mirror each other so that institutions can compare and contrast feedback from these 4 different groups of users of their digital infrastructure. Over the last few months, we've been looking at the questions to make sure they more usefully reflect the current situation which we find ourselves in, where students and staff have had to flex from moving on campus to remotely in other locations. So now the questions directly ask about the experience in the last 2 weeks, so institutions understand what sort of experience their students or staff were experiencing when they completed the survey. As I mentioned, in addition to the surveys, we also produce other resources, and we worked with the UK National Union of Students to develop a roadmap on what a good digital experience looked like. So it's kind of a maturity model. So institutions can look at their own data and gauge where they are on that maturity model. These resources are freely available, so do have a look at them and see whether you could use them in your current context. One of the most important themes that has come through the data year on year is about the need for good leadership and a good culture that embraces digital in order for students and staff to really thrive and get the most out of the digital infrastructure. So we developed this briefing paper, which again you can have a look at and see if you could use it in your context. As well as working with UK universities and colleges, we've also worked with several global universities. So we worked with a set of Australian and New Zealand universities a couple of years ago and developed a report for them based on their data. And you can have a look at it on our website. Then excitingly, last year we worked with the Irish National Forum for Teaching and Learning, and they were able to get all of their university and HE institutions to run the student and teaching staff survey and produce an excellent baseline for their strategy that they'll be implementing over the next 5 years. So please do go to their website and have a look at all the exciting work they've been doing. So now the main focus is on the UK University 2020 data. As you can see, we had over 20,000 responses. 90% of these were before the 23rd of March when we experienced lockdown. So whilst the majority of data was collected pre-lockdown, it still provides us with a valuable insight into how students were using technology for their learning. Here's a list of the 4 themes that I'll go through one by one. So firstly, you and your technology. Although a large percentage of students had access to these devices, more information might be needed to ensure we know whether the devices are sufficient specification to access the institutional systems and software. As well as the device then, it's also really important that they had reliable connectivity, both on campus and off campus with remote learning, because there were 3 components students and staff needed in order to be able to learn effectively in a remote environment. And that was a device, connectivity, and also a safe space where they could learn if it wasn't going to be on campus. Once they had these 3 components, then it was important that students, and indeed staff, had the right attitude towards learning through technology and also the confidence. This was a new question in 1920 survey. And although 70% of students were either very or quite confident at trying out new technologies, only 43% of them were comfortable with using mainstream technology. And this was echoed in a recent consultation event we ran in July, where students said they might feel comfortable and confident in some technologies, but not all technologies. So it's really important for institutions to make sure that they do appropriate induction to help students understand how to use their organisational technology. Switching quickly to the teaching staff data. Now we're in the middle of analysing this data and producing a report that will be published in late November. It will be freely available from our website, so please do go there to have a look and find out more information about what our teaching staff were telling us and how that compares to what students were saying. We had an interesting debate with our expert panel the other day about whether it's more desirable to have more staff helping each other sometimes, or whether to have a few experts that help everybody. And that is important in what sort of training and support we offer staff going forward, because a lot of technologies and software are having small incremental releases rather than large upgrades. And this means then that people don't tend to now go on week-long or month-long courses to learn new technology. It's much more incremental. And so we need to consider that when we're designing how we support students and also teaching staff in adopting new technologies. As well as the quantitative questions, we also have some free text questions where students can give fuller responses. And this is one of the key themes that came out through the post-lockdown research, is about digital poverty. And it's something that we really need to seriously address so that all students have an equitable experience when they return to university. Although the figures are overall positive about improvements. Ensuring all students have access to organisational systems and services from wherever they are studying is really important. So looking here at our second theme, students are using their own devices for learning. They will still need support in order to do this, to access the institutional systems. So the induction process need to ensure that these critical areas of support are picked up and students know where to access the resource. Although it's worth remembering that students were completing the survey prior to the 21st of March, there are these areas that are still surprising. For example, only 51% of students have access to recorded lectures. Now this might be because they don't know where to go to find them, rather than them not being there at all. So this feedback is all really important information for institutions to have in order to know how to improve the student experience. Moving over to the teaching staff data. Again, this is really important to understand how they feel about the technology. Is it being designed well into their physical space so that they can use it effectively? And indeed now, is it being designed into the curriculum, delivery, as well as the physical space, so that students and staff can get the most out of the experience? The qualitative data universities who run our surveys get provide some very rich information. We had a vast volume collected this year, and we were able to analyse all this free text questions to pick out some key themes. Unsurprisingly, the main means for discussing and collaborating was reported to be social media, such as WhatsApp, Snapchat, Facebook, followed by communication tools such as email and messenger, and video conferencing platforms such as Teams and Zoom. Among social media, Facebook was more widely cited in HE than FE. So it's interesting to see how different cohorts of students use different applications. And it's useful for teaching staff to know this, to know how to adapt their teaching. Although we have been championing student partnership for over 10 years now in the UK, it is disappointing to see that some students still don't feel they have a chance to be involved in the decisions about the digital environment. The surveys are designed to raise awareness of the student voice and the way for universities to engage with students in an ongoing dialogue around digital. With the increasing amount of data being collected about students, universities have a duty to ensure that students are informed on how their data is being used and collected. They may do this, but students are not actively recognising it. Moving on to theme 3. It is pleasing to see that students are rating the quality of the digital teaching and learning highly. And this question on who supports you most to use technology in your learning highlights the importance of lecturers knowing how to use the technology and how it can benefit the students' learning. This question is a good indicator of the digital activities students undertake. As we progress through this list, and more of it is about transactional use of technology to transformational. And as we move down the list, you can see the percentage drops. This is concerning to see that 44% of students never had the opportunity of collaborating online. This is an essential skill to prepare students for a digital workplace, particularly in the context of COVID, as we're sure that more workers will be allowed to work remotely even after the pandemic situation is resolved. Continuing 3, students were asked to describe what their organisation could do to improve the quality of digital teaching and learning. Over 11,000 students gave responses to this question. So we were able to analyse it and produce some really actionable information for participating organisations. As anticipated, students used this opportunity to raise issues that they most urgently wanted changed. Their answers do not provide a balanced view of their digital experience, nor do they necessarily reveal the issues that would be most at the top of students' priorities at other colleges or universities. So it's important to look at your local data. However, we can still get some information out of it at a national level to see what institutions are doing in terms of using technology. Turning to the teaching staff data, and here we can see what they think they would like the organisation to do. So there are slight differences between the HE college sector and the university HE sectors, but generally they're looking at the same themes that are important to them. And that includes not only having the devices and the connectivity or the environment, but also having time to train and learn the skills that they are going to need to have to help share the importance of digital skills with students. Another theme that comes through with the teaching data is the importance of good leadership and a culture for staff to be able to grow and develop in their digital capabilities and skills. And again, that's why we produce briefing papers to help support the leaders within organisations better understand why digital is important. As I've mentioned, some of the qualitative data that we get back can be quite extreme, but I think this reflects that actually students are having extreme and very varied experiences during this pandemic and the need to work remotely. So we can't assume that they're all in a similar place when they come back to us at the start of the new academic year. We have to make sure that we provide the support and they know where to go for this support to help them if they need additional support in developing their digital skills. Moving on to the last theme, developing your digital skills. Here we can see that 51% of university students agreed that they had received guidance about digital skills. However, only 34% of them agreed that their university provided them with a chance to assess their digital skills. And this is a really critical area, especially for career planning. HE respondents specified the type of support that they wanted more often, whether it be in their course or a standalone workshop or as online training. Online resources for skills development were often specified, such as video, though more students asked for face-to-face opportunities than online. And this, whilst it might be very difficult during the current remote requirement for remote learning, is something to bear in mind when students are allowed back on campus. They also gave information on the topics that they would like support in, like analysis skills, research, or information skills. Turning back to teaching staff and what they were saying, and they really gave some very insightful information about how they perceive the physical environment was well integrated with technology or not. And whilst this might not be a high priority at the moment because the need to do it remotely, it's worth considering what could be done when people, students and staff are allowed back onto campus. So as I've mentioned, the survey was designed and launched and data collected mainly before lockdown. So whilst the pandemic situation may have influenced how students responded to the questions after the date, the questions were really designed to refer to the ongoing digital experience and not one that might suddenly change in the middle of the academic year. Therefore, we cannot know in general whether responses collected after the 23rd of March were intended to relate to the current situation or the previous experience. However, here are some key themes that came out in the qualitative data post-lockdown. And they're important things to think about as we go forward into the next academic year. So in order to improve the digital experience for students, the findings gave some clear indications, and these are the three standout areas. That pedagogy and learning design needs to be adapted to incorporate technology seamlessly. It needs to address the digital access and inequalities that this situation has put many students in, but also how to develop their digital capabilities. The survey findings highlighted the need for digitally mediated collaboration, which students often don't get the chance to do. The low responses were recorded for activities such as discussing coursework with peers, working online with others, and discussing digital skills development with other students. So it's important to think about the redesign of your courses going forward. As I've mentioned, you can get access to our reports, and we have a short report that has highlights of our findings, but also we have the full question by question analysis for you to have a look at. As I've mentioned, the teaching staff report will be coming out in mid to late November. So please do go to our website and download those reports to see whether you could adapt them for your situation. As I've mentioned, we've got other toolkits there, but please do join our community of practice so that we can engage with you and see whether our resources can help you too. Thank you for listening.